First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. His military and political experience in the French and Indian War, as a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses in Williamsburg, and as a delegate to the Continental Congress, made him the perfect choice to lead the Continental Army during the American Revolution and later to preside over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. The only president elected unanimously in the Electoral College, he set precedents for the American presidency, which have lasted through the centuries. Voluntarily retiring to his estate on the Potomac, he has been revered by generations of Americans as the father of his country. He is our nation's first chief executive, George Washington. In this series of videos, we'll take a look at locations that you can visit and books that you can read associated with each U.S. president. In the case of George Washington, where we begin today, there are many sites associated with President Washington that are related to his wartime experience. Too many really to show in this program. From Fort Necessity near Pittsburgh, where he fought in the French and Indian War, to numerous sites associated with the American Revolution, including Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, the Washington Delaware Crossing site in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and of course Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where Washington served as president of the Constitutional Convention. In each episode, we'll take a look at a map showing locations that you can visit across the country for each president, and then show you some photographs of those locations, some which I took in my travels and others which were taken by others. And then we will also take a look at some books that I have in my collection associated with that particular president and the times in which they live. So as I said, we begin with our first president, George Washington. Let's take a look at a map of Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay region. This is an area with a lot of sites associated with George Washington and an area that he knew very well. George Washington was born at Pope's Creek in the area of Virginia's Northern Neck in this area, and you can visit that today, the George Washington Birthplace National Historic Site. He grew up at Ferry Farm in Fredericksburg, another spot that you can visit. And there's the Mary Ball Washington House in Fredericksburg. Washington actually visited his mother there for the last time on his way to his inauguration in 1789. He spent a lot of time in Williamsburg, which of course was the colonial capital of Virginia, and which today has been recreated as Colonial Williamsburg. He also famously fought at the Battle of Yorktown and received the surrender of General Cornwallis and his troops, essentially ending the Revolutionary War. So this all happened on the James Peninsula in this area here, and you can visit all of these sites today. And of course, his estate at Mount Vernon up in this area is where he's buried. Now let's take a look at a few photographs of these locations. Let's take a look now at some of the books in my library associated with George Washington. If you're looking for a good readable biography of Washington that covers his whole life, I would recommend George Washington, A Life by Willard Stern Randall. It was published in 1997. There is a longer biography of Washington by Ron Chernow that's very popular that you might want to take a look at. It's always good to look at primary sources. This is the Journal of Major George Washington. He undertook a journey to the French forces on the Ohio River on the eve of the French and Indian War. So the royal governor of Virginia, Governor Dinwiddie, sent him there. This is his journal as he reported back to Governor Dinwiddie, and this is published by Colonial Williamsburg. A Charming Field for an Encounter is the story of George Washington's Fort Necessity. Fort Necessity, as I mentioned, is in southwestern Pennsylvania, not far from Pittsburgh. It was a site of an engagement during the French and Indian War, and this booklet tells the story of that. And a very good book about Washington's presidency by Richard Norton Smith, who was the director of a couple of different presidential libraries over the years. This book, which came out in 1993, is called Patriarch, George Washington and the New American Nation. Very readable, and everything you ever wanted to know about the first presidency. George Washington's Mount Vernon. This is just the guidebook from the site at Mount Vernon, but it's very useful information. You might even want to get it before you go and read it, but I would definitely encourage you to visit Mount Vernon. And if you can't go, get this book, and there's some good pictures in it, and it tells a lot about Washington and his estate on the Potomac. And the last one I have to show you is a book called George Washington, Figure Upon the Stage. And this has a lot of artifacts that are owned by the Smithsonian Institution relating to President Washington. So I hope I've encouraged you to do some reading and to visit some good historic sites when you're able to. Our next program will focus on our nation's second president, John Adams.